Hello and welcome to FVTV. I'm Thomas Parker and today I'm going to talk to you about two different vintages of Carmes de Rieussec. I've got the 2017 and the 2010. Carmes de Rieussec is the second wine of Chateau Rieussec, which is probably one of the most famous names in Sauternes in Bordeaux. It was bought in the 1980s by the Baron de Rothschild family, who are perhaps best known for Chateau Lafite, but added this to their portfolio as they wanted to have a strong Sauternes brand. The vineyard here is one of the best in all of Sauternes. It sits between Yquem and Fargues, so it has some really high quality fruit to make some of the great wines that it does. And it's quite heavily planted with Semillon. Both of these wines will be 80 to 90%, maybe even more Semillon. That gives a real sort of waxiness and breadth to the wines, whereas the Sauternes that are sort of more Sauvignon Blanc based tend to be more aromatic and more kind of zippy. These are quite broad and full. Carmes de Rieussec is a little bit of a step back from Chateau Rieussec itself though, which can be quite heavy and quite sweetly toasted in its youth. These are much more fresh and approachable. Some people don't really still understand how Sauternes works, so I thought I'd quickly go into that, which is, it's quite simple. So you have these mists that come in the morning that provide the moisture that give you what people call Botrytis cinerea, perhaps better known by most people as noble rot. And this rot is quite special because it doesn't ruin the grapes, but in fact enhances them. So it pierces the skin, but leaves the grape intact. That concentrates both the sugars and the acidity, so you get a wine that's both sweet but also fresh. And it produces enough potential alcohol so that you've still got 120 to 150 grams of residual sugar in these wines, even though they ferment to 13, 14 degrees of alcohol. It also adds some flavour complexity to the wine. So a lot of the time people will talk about maybe marmalade or saffron, or in the older wines maybe some sort of dried mushroom. So the difference between this and a lot of the other sweet wines of the world is that this noble rot adds complexity to the wines, and that is certainly the case for these two wines here. I think quite good to compare these two vintages just to show you how well these wines age. Even though it's a second wine, I think, you know, you can see the difference in the colour, but they're both fairly pale. This is the 17 on my right, on your left, which is very pale, sort of lemon in colour. And the 2010 is still very much a sort of pale gold. Hopefully you can see that or see it on the bottles there. If we take a sniff first of the 2017, it's still very fresh. There's almost sort of a sweet grapefruit quality in that, but you've got that sort of saffron and marmalade that I was talking about, but it's more sort of lemony, kind of lemon curd maybe, rather than full-on marmalade. I really like the freshness and zippiness of this wine. You can tell it's going to be very appetizing and very fresh. The spice is very toned down as well. Rieussec, when it's as young as this 2017, you feel a lot of the oak in there, but you don't really get that, even though it does spend quite a bit of time in barrel. 2010, yeah, it feels richer, and I think that's more the age than anything else. There's quite a bit of sort of apricot and peach in there. Definitely more of your sort of marmalade tones, and maybe just the slightest hint of some dried mushrooms, some sort of dried cep, but it is still all about the fruit. It feels like it's going to be sort of richer and denser on the palate at this stage, but let's see. Remarkably fresh. I love that. Absolutely great to drink now. It's all about the fruit, but there's that savoury, earthy complexity just comes through. There's, I don't know, this Botrytis has like saffron. You get that kind of old library. It's a very pretentious thing to say, but it just has that kind of savoury edge despite the fact it's a sweet wine. And there's a lot of acidity despite the weight of the fruit. Gorgeous. Now I'd be drinking this, well, I will drink this tonight probably because I think it's absolutely gorgeous, but you could drink this over 15 years because Sauternes ages so well. I mean, you probably drink it all before it gets to that age, but it will go the distance. This 2010. So it's sort of sweet and savoury. There's honey, heather, more of that saffron, and there's definitely that dried mushroom and marmalade in there. It definitely feels like an earthy and savoury wine, and as I sort of mentioned on the nose of these two wines, it feels richer and waxier and broader, a slightly sort of denser wine than this 17, which is all about that zip and lightness. This wine, I would think, warrants some food, but it's really at the peak of its powers because you've got that interplay between the fruit and the savoury. You know, it's got that tertiary note that adds that lovely sort of caramelly texture that we love about Sauternes. I drink this wine now, and over the next 5-6 years, I think it's really in its peak. These wines will probably keep going further, but they're just so gorgeous, I think you won't have any left. If you'd like to know more about these wines or about the other wines that Farvintners has to sell, as always, go to farvintners.com. Until next time, cheers.